If they truly love you, they may ignore you. But here's why. The psychological reason. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Carl Jung. Sometimes, the ones who love us most are the ones who pull away, not out of indifference, but because their soul is undergoing a quiet transformation. In today's episode from Spiritual Wisdom, we explore the deeper, often unseen, psychological truths behind emotional distance. Could the space you're feeling be a form of love in disguise? Comment below if you've ever loved someone silently, and let's reflect together on the complexity of human connection. 1. Love is paradoxical and unconscious. Love isn't always what it seems. It doesn't always speak in warm gestures or comforting words. Sometimes, love shows up as silence. Sometimes, it feels like distance. And while our logical minds may rush to assume the worst, that the other person no longer cares, Carl Jung teaches us to look deeper. Love, he says, is not just a conscious feeling. It is a reflection of the unconscious mind, a mirror of the soul. When someone you love pulls away without explanation, it's often not because their love has faded, but because something within them is stirring, something they may not yet have the language to express. That distance may not be rejection. It may be the soul's cry for understanding, for integration, for safety in the face of emotional overwhelm. Most people do not run from love. They run from what love brings up inside them, the shadows, the wounds, the memories they've buried. And so, when the soul is overwhelmed, it retreats, not because it's void of love, but because the love is too heavy to hold in its current form. In truth, the unconscious often speaks in ways the conscious mind cannot translate. It doesn't always scream or explain. It whispers, hides, or disappears. When love activates old wounds or triggers deep fear, the person who once clung to you may suddenly disappear. Not because they've stopped loving you, but because they've stopped knowing how to love themselves in your presence. The connection may feel too intense, too intimate, too vulnerable, especially for those who were never taught how to sit with their emotions or speak their pain. In that silence, the unconscious takes over, pulling them inward into a space where words are replaced by confusion and feelings become unbearable. And while you may feel abandoned, what's truly happening is a spiritual collapse within them, an inner storm that has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with their internal struggle. Jung reminded us that what we fail to make conscious will control us from the shadows. Emotional withdrawal is one such shadow. It isn't always a choice. It's often a reaction rooted in pain that predates the relationship. It can be the echo of a childhood wound, the voice of an old fear saying, "Don't get too close or you'll be hurt." And so, even when love is real, it doesn't always feel safe. When two souls meet and the connection is genuine, it often triggers the deepest layers of the psyche. That's the paradox. Love awakens both the beauty and the brokenness within us. The more it matters, the more it exposes. And exposure is terrifying for someone who hasn't yet made peace with their past. So instead of taking distance personally, see it as a mirror of the other person's soul, reflecting their internal chaos. You are not the cause, you are simply the trigger. Their withdrawal is not a measure of how lovable you are, but of how unready they are to confront their own emotional truth. Holding space for this reality does not mean tolerating silence without boundaries, but it does mean recognizing the difference between absence and indifference. There are moments in love when the soul steps back, not to abandon, but to breathe, to process, to survive, to make sense of what the heart feels but cannot say. And in those moments, what looks like distance may actually be love in its most vulnerable, unspoken form. If this message about the unconscious nature of love speaks to your soul, comment below. I embrace the paradox to affirm your willingness to explore deeper truths. 2. The unconscious drives our emotional behavior. Carl Jung taught that love is not just a conscious emotion, but a mirror that reveals what lives deep in the unconscious. The fears, wounds, and patterns we don't even realize we carry. When someone falls in love, it's not only their joy that's exposed, it's also the fragile parts of their soul, the insecurities they've never spoken of, and the pain they've long tried to bury. The closer they feel to someone, the more those hidden parts rise to the surface. And when the emotions become too intense, when the connection feels too real, the unconscious may respond by pulling away not out of rejection, but out of self-protection. This isn't about logic. It's about emotional survival. The person doesn't withdraw because they've stopped loving you. They withdraw because that love has awakened something too raw, too overwhelming, too deep to process all at once. This is where many people misunderstand the distance. You might believe they lost interest, moved on, or never truly cared. But in truth, the more powerful the love, the more threatening it can feel to someone whose inner child has never felt safe in vulnerability. Imagine a man who was never truly seen growing up, who had to earn attention through achievement or strength. When he meets someone who sees his soul without him performing, it's unfamiliar. It's terrifying. And without realizing it, he distances himself, not because he wants to lose love, but because he doesn't know how to hold it. Carl Jung warned that what we do not make conscious will continue to shape our lives, and we will call it fate. In love, this means we often sabotage what we want most because we don't recognize the forces working beneath the surface. So if someone has gone quiet, cold, or emotionally distant, don't rush to label it indifference. There's a chance their soul still loves you deeply, but their unconscious has hit a wall. Their silence may be grief, not goodbye. Their retreat may be their nervous system screaming for safety in a world that just got too emotionally loud. The human heart, especially one that's been hurt before, often confuses love with danger when it starts to feel too intense. The soul longs for intimacy, but the unconscious fears exposure. And in that tug of war, distance becomes the only way to cope. What Carl Jung gave us is not just knowledge, it's a map for compassion. He helps us see that people often run from love, not because of its absence, but because of its power. If you've been on the receiving end of that distance, you don't need to beg, chase, or shrink. You need to understand. You need to see the soul behind the silence. And most of all, you need to stay anchored in your own healing. Because in love, it's not always the loud declarations or the constant presence that prove its truth. Sometimes, it's the soul that trembles, the silence that hides longing, and the distance that reveals just how much is still unresolved within. 3. Distance can be a defense mechanism. Distance is not always the absence of love. It is often its most misunderstood form. When someone has carried the weight of past wounds, abandonment, betrayal, emotional suffocation, they begin to see love not as a sanctuary, but as a battlefield. The very thing they long for becomes the very thing they fear. Real closeness awakens their unconscious defenses, and instead of leaning in, they pull away. Not because they've stopped loving you, but because the presence of genuine intimacy shines too bright a light on their unhealed pain. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And that is what happens here. Your love touches something too raw inside them, something they've buried so deeply it feels safer to run than to receive. Their withdrawal is not rejection, it's an emotional reflex. It is their nervous system protecting old scars. It is their spirit shielding itself from reliving a story it's not ready to rewrite. You may interpret their silence as indifference, but what if it's the opposite? What if the silence is sacred space? Not absence, but overload. The soul doesn't always scream. Sometimes it hides. Sometimes the ones who love you most don't know how to stay close, because closeness feels like surrendering control. When love brings up old fears of being hurt, manipulated, or abandoned again, distance becomes a survival mechanism, not a choice. The love didn't vanish. It got buried beneath the rubble of their past. You just triggered something they weren't spiritually equipped to handle. And when that happens, it's not your fault. You became a mirror, and what they saw wasn't your flaws. It was their own shadow. Jung taught us that the shadow is the unconscious part of us that we refuse to see, but true love always brings it to the surface. It exposes the unresolved, the repressed, the frightened child within. And when that child feels unsafe, they do what they've always done to hide. But this isn't just about them. It's also about you. Because if you're spiritually aware, you'll begin to see the space they've created not as an ending, but as a mirror to your own expectations, your own fears, your own need for validation. Love is never one-sided in its lessons. The one who pulls away is teaching you how to hold space, how to love without clinging, how to stand in your worth without chasing what's unsure. It is not your job to heal someone who is terrified of your light. It is your job to remain anchored in your own. Distance invites you to grow in trust. Trust in timing, trust in transformation, and trust that real love is never destroyed by space. The most spiritual act you can offer someone who's pulled away is to not take it personally, because it rarely is. It's ancestral pain, it's emotional overwhelm, it's unconscious fear, and it's unfolding exactly as it must. So don't mistake their distance as the death of connection. Sometimes love needs air. Sometimes healing needs solitude. Sometimes the soul must journey inward before it can reach out again. And if that love is real, if it's rooted in something deeper than emotion, something spiritual, it will return. Not rushed, not forced, but renewed. Comment below. I am open to healing love. If you're ready to understand emotional distance and embrace deeper connections without fear. 4. Don't chase someone who's pulling away. When someone you love begins to pull away, your instinct may be to close the gap, to fix the silence, to chase what's slipping from your grasp, but doing so often creates the very resistance you're trying to avoid. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." And in relationships, this truth cuts deep. Love that feels distant is not always love that has disappeared. Often, it's love that's retreating into the unconscious, into the soul's hidden layers, where it must confront pain, confusion, or transformation. Forcing closeness in such moments is like pressing on a wound that isn't ready to heal. It doesn't help, it only hurts. The spiritual response, the wiser response, is to give space not out of detachment, but out of trust. Space allows the other person's soul to breathe, to face what it must face without the pressure of performance, without the fear of letting you down. This kind of love is not passive, it is powerful. Holding space is not the same as walking away. It is a quiet declaration that says, I trust your journey even when I cannot walk it with you. In a world that teaches men to fix, to pursue, to conquer, it takes true strength to sit in stillness and offer no solutions. But this strength is what makes love feel safe, not smothered. One man once shared how his partner grew distant after a loss in her family. He tried everything: words, affection, plans, but nothing brought her back. When he finally stopped trying to fix it and simply said, I'm here when you need me, she returned, not because he chased her, but because his presence gave her the freedom to feel without fear. That's what spiritual wisdom looks like in action. Honoring another's emotional process without turning it into a reflection of your own insecurity. Often, distance is not a sign of fading affection. It's a sign that something deeper is surfacing. Jung believed that the soul reveals itself in silence, in symbolic gestures, and in the unconscious choices people make. A loved one's withdrawal might not be about you at all. It might be the soul's cry for solitude, for integration, for clarity that words cannot yet provide. The ego says, prove yourself, demand answers, don't let them get away. But the soul says, be still. Let them unfold. Respect the rhythm of healing. When you shift from needing to be chosen to choosing to be understanding, you move from fear into strength, from attachment into love that liberates. Spiritual growth asks you to stop making someone else's silence about your worth. It asks you to feel the discomfort without reacting to it, to ground yourself in your own truth while holding space for theirs. There is nothing more attractive, more reassuring, or more magnetic than someone whose soul does not panic in the face of uncertainty. This kind of energy says, I am not chasing you. I am here, rooted and whole, if and when you return. And sometimes, that is the very energy that draws them back, not because you demanded it, but because your presence reminded them of what safety, patience, and soul-connected love truly feel like. If this message resonates with you, give it a like, subscribe for more soulful wisdom, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's grow in patience, presence, and inner strength together. 5. Sometimes, distance is a test or a cycle. Sometimes, when someone creates distance, it's not rejection. It's a subconscious pattern rooted in emotional survival. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Many people unknowingly repeat cycles of emotional retreat because closeness triggers fear rather than comfort. They might withdraw right when things begin to feel real, not because love is absent, but because love feels dangerous. Their soul has been wired to associate intimacy with pain, inconsistency, or betrayal. So they pull back, not to test you, but to protect themselves. What you feel as silence could be their nervous system screaming for safety. This isn't about your worth. It's about their wounds. And sometimes, distance becomes a ritual they perform over and over again, hoping to finally feel in control of emotions they don't yet understand. They crave love, yet fear being seen. They long for connection, yet run from the very presence that offers it. Distance becomes the armor for a heart that never learned how to trust peace. Take someone like David. In his early 40s, admired by many, grounded on the outside, but the moment someone got too close, he vanished. No explanations, just absence. One day, he'd be deeply involved, tender, making plans. The next, completely silent. Not because the feelings disappeared, but because they became too heavy for a soul that never felt safe holding them. It wasn't about the person he was with. It was about the unresolved inner story playing out through him. Only after diving into Carl Jung's work did he see that his pattern wasn't love. It was fear disguised as self-preservation. This cycle of leaving and returning, of testing the emotional waters but never fully staying, had less to do with his partner and everything to do with the ghost of his own childhood. His soul was asking a deeper question. Can I be close and still be safe? That is the question so many people are unknowingly trying to answer through their actions. So if someone pulls away from you, don't immediately assume they stopped loving you. Some people don't know how to stay, not because they're careless, but because they never learned how to emotionally rest in love. The real question is not if they'll come back, but whether they'll return with the emotional maturity and spiritual awareness to remain. Because if they can't face themselves, they will never truly face you. If they do come back, and this time with clarity, presence, and responsibility, then perhaps something new can grow. But if they continue to disappear every time intimacy touches a nerve, then you must love yourself enough to stop calling that love. Carl Jung believed that true transformation happens when we become aware of the patterns that once controlled us. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is not holding on, but standing still, grounded in your own spiritual wholeness, refusing to chase someone still haunted by their own soul. 6. If they don't return, the love still served a purpose. Even if they never return, their presence in your life was not a mistake. It was a spiritual assignment. Love doesn't always come to stay. Sometimes it comes to stir the soul, to break open the parts of you that were hidden beneath the surface. Carl Jung taught us that what we do not make conscious will control our lives. So ask yourself, honestly, are you grieving them? Or are you grieving the version of yourself that only felt whole in their presence? Sometimes we don't miss the person. We miss the illusion, the comfort, the idea of not being alone. But their absence is not the end of your story. It may be the beginning of your awakening. They arrived not to complete you, but to reveal to you the parts of yourself you've been avoiding: the need for self-love, for boundaries, for spiritual growth, for sovereignty. Their impact might have touched corners of your soul that no one else ever could. Not because they were your forever, but because they were your mirror. A spiritual connection doesn't always mean a lifelong union. Sometimes it means a sacred collision that forces you to meet yourself at a deeper level. This is the hidden reason people come into our lives and leave without warning. They act as catalysts, not companions. You may think they abandoned you, but spiritually, they may have delivered exactly what your soul needed. an initiation into a new version of yourself. The silence they left behind is not empty. It's full of messages, full of meaning, full of lessons you were meant to learn. Their absence is not rejection, it's redirection. If you're willing to listen to what the distance is saying, you'll hear something sacred. You'll hear the whisper of your own worth, the call to rise without needing to be held, the realization that your wholeness was never dependent on someone else's presence. This is where true spiritual growth begins, not in the presence of love, but in the courage to remain open-hearted in its absence. You are not alone. You are being shaped. You are not forgotten. You are being refined. The love served its purpose, even if the person could not stay. And that purpose was to awaken the divine within you. Do you feel the truth in this message? If so, affirm it in the comments. That love awakened my soul, and I'm grateful. And if this spoke to your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. We're growing through every connection. 7. Their disappearance reflects their inner world, not your worth. Their silence is not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of their inner chaos. When someone you care about begins to withdraw, to grow distant without explanation, your instinct may be to question what you did wrong, but the answer often lies deep within their own soul. Carl Jung taught that what we do not make conscious will continue to control our lives, and this is especially true in relationships. Many men retreat, not because they no longer care, but because love has triggered something buried wounds they've never faced, truths they've never processed, parts of themselves they've spent years avoiding. This withdrawal is not calculated or even fully understood by them. It's an unconscious reflex, a soul's defense against emotional intensity it doesn't know how to hold. They're not leaving you, they're running from themselves. And in that flight, they're not always aware of the pain they leave behind. When you try to force answers from someone in that state, what you often get is confusion or resistance, not truth. Because healing doesn't come from pressure. It comes from willingness. And willingness only arrives when a man is ready to sit with his own brokenness and stop hiding from the mirror that love has become. You are not too much. You are just real. And real love demands growth, but not everyone is ready to meet their own growth. The soul doesn't evolve on someone else's timeline. What you're seeing is not rejection, but resistance. Not to you, but to the transformation you awaken in them. In many cases, their inner work must be done alone, in silence, through discomfort and distance, without you holding their hand through it. It is a spiritual pause disguised as emotional abandonment, but it is never your job to fix what someone hasn't chosen to face. Letting go of the need for clarity from them allows space for your own clarity to rise. Your peace depends not on their return, but on your ability to separate your value from their behavior. The truth is, they may still love you deeply, but love alone is never enough when a soul is unready. And so, while they retreat into the shadows of their psyche, you are left with a choice not to chase, not to wait endlessly, but to turn inward, tend to your own healing, and honor the wisdom of this moment. Because just as their soul must meet its wounds, so must yours meet its strength. 8. Real love is a journey of growth. Real love isn't about clinging, chasing, or controlling. It's about becoming. Carl Jung once said, Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And nothing brings your unconscious to the surface faster than love. When someone truly touches your soul, they don't just offer comfort, they reveal your blind spots, awaken your buried wounds, and activate emotions you've long avoided. That's why people often retreat when love gets too real. It's not always because they've stopped caring, but because the connection has triggered a storm inside them that they don't yet know how to weather. Love that's deep enough to stir the soul is also deep enough to surface fear, shame, guilt, or past trauma. So when they grow distant, it may not be rejection. It may be a form of spiritual overwhelm. Imagine a man who has spent his entire life being the provider, the strong one, never asking for help, never showing his heart. Then he meets a woman who sees straight through his strength and into his longing, and it terrifies him. Not because she's wrong, but because she reflects back a part of himself he has never made peace with. And so, he pulls away, not to punish her, but to protect himself from the intensity of being seen. This is what Carl Jung meant. The unconscious will run the show unless we face it head on. In soul-level relationships, the love is rarely linear. It ebbs and flows. And sometimes, the very presence of another can be so spiritually activating that it feels unbearable. Their love confronts your deepest fears of being unworthy, unlovable, or not enough. So you or they might withdraw. That retreat is not a sign that the love is fake. It's a sign that the soul is being stretched beyond its comfort zone. In these moments, the distance becomes sacred space, where the transformation unfolds. It is here that you are invited to do the real work, not in proving your worth to them, not in chasing after their attention, but in holding yourself through the storm. If they still love you, even from afar, it means the bond is still working its alchemy, even if it's hidden behind silence. Your role is not to decode their behavior or beg for connection, but to ask, what part of me is being invited into healing? What shadow has love brought into the light? When someone disappears, it can feel like abandonment, but sometimes it's a pause designed by the soul to allow for inner integration. The space they create may be the very condition needed for you to remember your own wholeness. It's easy to confuse emotional absence with indifference, but in reality, some people care so deeply that they run. They run because they can't meet the version of themselves that love demands them to become. Carl Jung's teachings remind us that true transformation begins not when we are loved perfectly, but when we learn to sit with the discomfort that love reveals. So let the silence speak. Let the distance show you what you've been avoiding. Let it burn away your illusions. Because sometimes, the most powerful declaration of love is not closeness. It's the growth you're both forced into when space enters the story. And even if they're gone right now, the imprint of the love remains, guiding your evolution in ways you can't yet see. The real test isn't whether they come back, but whether you rise in their absence. To honor your path of inner growth through love, declare it with intention. Comment below, I choose growth over control, to affirm your journey and inspire others to love with awareness, not attachment. Thank you for watching. Remember, distance doesn't always mean disconnection. Sometimes, love continues to flow silently beneath the surface, shaped by inner wounds, personal growth, or the soul's timing. Just as Carl Jung suggested, what's unconscious is often more powerful than what's seen. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share this video with someone who may need to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into the unseen truths of the soul. Until next time, stay aware, stay compassionate, and trust the deeper current of connection. Do nothing after this, and observe how everything falls into place. Silence is a source of great strength. Lao Tzu. In a world that constantly pushes us to react, fix, and control, Carl Jung offers a powerful alternative to observe without interfering. What if the universe doesn't need your force, but your presence? In today's video on Spiritual Wisdom, we explore how non-interference, deep inner stillness, and quiet witnessing can create the most profound transformations in your life. Have you ever experienced a moment where doing nothing brought the biggest shift? Comment below with your story, and let's awaken together through the power of surrender. 1. Doing more isn't the answer. Surrender is. Most men are taught that if something in their life isn't working, they need to push harder, more action, more goals, more discipline. But Carl Jung offered a quiet truth that disrupts this belief. Real transformation doesn't begin with more effort. It begins with surrender. The soul does not respond to pressure. It awakens in presence. When you constantly chase change through doing, you may be avoiding the very stillness where true clarity lives. Jung's timeless teaching, "What you resist persists," reveals that our efforts to control, fix, and force often amplify the very things we wish to escape. The pain doesn't leave, it just gets buried deeper. The chaos doesn't disappear, it waits for your silence to speak louder. Striving, in many cases, is a subtle form of resistance. It says, I don't accept what is, and I must force something better. But what if that very posture blocks the soul's natural intelligence from guiding your path? The unconscious, as Jung taught, is not moved by force. It's moved by attention. It responds to inner stillness, not outer struggle. This is where the masculine urge to do meets the deeper wisdom of being. It's not about abandoning responsibility. It's about aligning with the current instead of swimming upstream. Most of us are so used to intervening, planning, and fixing that we miss what the universe is already trying to unfold through our lives. The soul speaks in symbols, dreams, patterns, none of which can be heard when we're drowning in noise. And often, it's in our most powerless moments, when nothing seems to work, that the invitation to surrender arises. We try the affirmations, the journaling, the visualizations, and still nothing. That's when the soul whispers, stop doing and start listening. Not with your ears, but with your being. Because surrender is not the same as giving up. It's the opposite. It's choosing to trust something beyond your ego's plan, beyond your mind's timeline. When you surrender, you let the universe rearrange your life in ways your logic never could. Think of nature. The tree does not force the fruit to ripen. The ocean doesn't control the tide, yet everything unfolds in perfect rhythm. Your soul is wired to the same rhythm, but interference disrupts it. When you try to manipulate the outcome, when you obsess over timing, you're sending a message that says, I don't trust the deeper intelligence guiding my life. Jung believed in honoring the unconscious because it's not random, it's sacred. And when you surrender, you begin to see its patterns, the synchronicities, the pauses. Even the losses start to make sense not as punishments, but as course corrections. Men who have spent their lives in control often fear surrender because it feels like weakness. But Jung's truth is that surrender is the strength of the soul. It's the moment you step back from interference and allow your inner world to reorganize itself. And in that space, the universe finally responds. Not to your demands, but to your readiness, your willingness to get out of the way. That's when the breakthrough comes, not when you force it, but when you stop chasing it. In that sacred stillness, everything begins to shift, not because you did more, but because you finally allowed the truth to rise. Have you ever tried surrendering instead of striving? If you've experienced a moment where letting go brought unexpected clarity or transformation, share it in the comments so others can be inspired. If you've never tried it, comment, "I choose surrender," and let's begin this powerful shift together. 2. The unconscious rules until made conscious. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate." And this silent truth is playing out in the lives of so many people who don't even realize it. You think you're making decisions from free will? But what if most of your choices are being made by invisible scripts written decades ago? Scripts that tell you you're not worthy of love, that success is dangerous, or that peace is something other people get to feel, not you. You keep doing the inner work affirmations, visualizations, setting goals, but nothing sticks because the foundation is cracked. The real problem isn't what you're doing. It's what you believe deep down without even knowing it. Your outer world keeps mirroring your inner state. And if that inner state is quietly screaming, "I'm not enough," then no matter how hard you try, chaos keeps finding its way back into your life. There was a man named Jake who lived his entire adult life thinking he just had bad luck. Every time he started a new job, he felt hopeful for a while. But somehow, the same pattern always emerged. He would feel unseen, overworked, and eventually disrespected. After a few months, he'd either quit or be pushed out. It didn't make sense. He was competent, reliable, and genuinely wanted to do well. But underneath all that effort was an unconscious belief that had been planted in childhood, that work equals suffering. He had watched his father come home exhausted every day, bitter and emotionally shut down. Somewhere along the way, Jake absorbed the idea that professional success must come at the cost of freedom and joy. He never questioned that belief. He didn't even know it was there. But once he discovered this hidden narrative and made it conscious, everything changed. His energy shifted, his sense of self-worth expanded, and within 6 months, he found himself in a leadership role that respected his boundaries and honored his value. This is the silent power of the unconscious. It's not just a psychological idea. It's the invisible architecture of your life. You keep attracting the same situations, the same emotions, and the same outcomes, not because the universe is cruel, but because your internal programming keeps sending the same signal. And the universe, in its neutrality, simply responds. That's why you can't fake wholeness. You can say all the right things, act confident, play the part, but if your inner world is filled with guilt, shame, or hidden self-loathing, it will all eventually leak through. Carl Jung understood this. He taught that true transformation doesn't come from pretending to be someone new. It comes from bringing light to the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. The parts that hurt, the parts that fear, the parts that learn to survive by staying small. If you're tired of repeating the same story, stop trying to change the story's ending and start looking at who's writing the script. Are you living from awareness or autopilot? Are you listening to your soul or reacting from old wounds? Pay attention to what triggers you, what you avoid, where you sabotage, because every one of those moments is a portal to a chance to become more conscious. And consciousness is power. When you finally meet the beliefs that have been running your life in the background, you no longer call them fate. You call them what they are: lessons, invitations, healing points. The soul's language is subtle but persistent, and until you decode it, you'll keep wondering why your reality doesn't match your effort. This is your reminder that the universe isn't responding to what you say you want. It's responding to who you are beneath the surface. And when you change that signal, everything else follows. 3. Stillness is sacred, not stagnation. Stillness is not the absence of life. It is where the real life begins. Carl Jung's creative void is not emptiness, but sacred ground. It's the mysterious in-between where your old self quietly dies and the new one hasn't yet arrived. It feels unsettling because the world around you worships movement, action, and progress. But the soul has a different rhythm. In this space of silence, though nothing seems to be happening on the surface, a quiet transformation is underway. Your nervous system softens its grip, your subconscious reorganizes, and your soul begins to rewire itself from survival to truth. Most people cannot tolerate this discomfort. They run, chase distractions, force decisions, and mistake stillness for weakness. But the men who are willing to stay, to feel the tension without solving it, are the ones who discover their power is not in doing, but in being. This void is not stagnation. It is spiritual recalibration. It is where the ego loses control and the soul takes the wheel. But make no mistake, this surrender requires strength. Society teaches you to act, fix, and push forward. But Jung reminds us that what you resist persists. Trying to rush this process only delays your growth and locks you into repeating the same emotional cycles dressed in different forms. It's like digging up the roots of a tree to check if it's growing. You kill it before it even has the chance. In the same way, interrupting your own stillness out of fear will only rob you of the very transformation you're seeking. The soul doesn't shout, it whispers. And in this silence, you begin to hear it again. Watch how the universe responds when you stop interfering. Life is not punishing you. It's inviting you to trust. As muddy water settles on its own, so will your path. You don't need to fill the space with noise, plans, or control. You need to feel safe doing nothing. Because in doing nothing, you are allowing the deeper intelligence of your soul to lead. It's here where synchronicities emerge, guidance appears in subtle forms, and you start noticing divine timing in ways you never could when you were busy forcing outcomes. This is not about passivity, it's about radical presence. Stillness doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're listening. It means you've reached a point in your evolution where being aligns more than doing, and trust becomes your compass. You are not behind. You are exactly where your soul needs you to be. Stay in the stillness. Let it undo what no longer belongs and create space for what truly does. The universe is already moving on your behalf. You just need to be still enough to see it. If this message of sacred stillness resonates with you, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your experience in the comments below. Have you ever felt that quiet in-between space, the pause before transformation? Let's reflect together and honor the power of becoming. 4. You're not being punished. You're being reflected. You're not being punished. You're being reflected. If things aren't moving, if doors seem closed, if your efforts feel unnoticed, it's not because the universe is turning away from you. It's because it's mirroring what you believe deep down. The spiritual truth is simple. The universe doesn't respond to your words. It responds to your frequency. You can repeat affirmations every day, but if they're coming from a place of fear, lack, or desperation, then that energy will cancel out the words. The energy behind your actions matters more than the actions themselves. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That unconscious is what gets broadcast into the universe louder than anything you say out loud. So if you're wondering why nothing's shifting, don't just look at what you're doing. Look at who you're being while doing it. The man who says, "I am successful," but secretly believes he's not good enough, is sending out confusion into the universe. The woman who visualizes love, but secretly fears abandonment, is asking the universe for something while simultaneously rejecting it through her energy. This is why people who seem to be doing less sometimes receive more. They're not forcing. They're not begging. They've learned to embody what they desire. They've aligned their spiritual identity with their external goals. They trust not because they have proof, but because they know alignment creates evidence, not the other way around. They don't manifest by chasing. They attract by becoming. And this becomes when you surrender control and allow the soul to guide the way. There's a spiritual principle that most people overlook. What you resist persists. The more you push, force, or obsess over an outcome, the more you tell the universe that you don't believe it's already yours. That vibration of lack gets echoed back. The universe is like a perfect emotional mirror. It doesn't punish you. It simply amplifies what you already believe. And belief isn't in the words, it's in the energy. So if you're operating from a place of control, fear, or unworthiness, then even your best efforts will feel heavy and unproductive. But when you step into the energy of peace, worthiness, and presence, things begin to move. You don't even need to chase. They start finding you. In everyday life, this shows up in the person who keeps changing careers, thinking the next job will fix their unhappiness, or in the person who keeps jumping from relationship to relationship, searching for love outside of themselves. But the truth is, the outer world doesn't shift until the inner world does. The discomfort, the waiting, the stillness, it's all sacred. It's the soul's invitation to stop interfering, to stop micromanaging destiny, and instead to surrender into alignment. What feels like a delay is often divine timing, preparing you for what you've asked for. And what looks like nothing happening is often everything rearranging behind the scenes. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. So the spiritual path isn't about doing more. It's about becoming still enough to hear your true frequency. Not the noise of anxiety, but the hum of your soul. Don't interfere, just watch. When your energy softens into trust, when your actions are born from inner knowing rather than panic, the universe responds differently. It reflects not your effort, but your essence. And when that essence is whole, calm, and grounded, reality bends to meet it. If this message resonated with you, comment "reflected" below to affirm your awareness. And if you're ready to shift your energy from fear to alignment, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Let's grow in spiritual wisdom together. 5. Doing nothing is radical trust. Doing nothing isn't laziness, it's radical spiritual trust. It's the soul's quiet rebellion in a world that worships constant effort. As Carl Jung understood deeply, real change doesn't come from forcing things into place, but from allowing the unconscious to guide the transformation. You don't need to beg the universe. You need to become the kind of person who no longer begs. Stillness isn't about giving up. It's a fierce, grounded statement. I am no longer chasing. I am aligning. When you stop interfering and start observing, you shift from desperate energy into magnetic calm. That shift is everything. You're not stepping away from action because you're confused. You're stepping back because you're finally clear. You trust that your intentions, once set, ripple out into the universe and attract exactly what's meant for you without the need for control or panic. There's a woman I know who tried tirelessly to manifest a new job. She'd send applications, perform every ritual she read about, visualize, pray, and affirm, but nothing worked. Until one day, she simply stopped, not out of defeat, but surrender. She applied for one last role, closed her laptop, and turned inward. She replaced anxious effort with journaling, meditating, walking in silence. That space created by her surrender became a portal. Within days, she received the call. She got the job. Not just any job, the one that fit her soul like a missing puzzle piece. That is what happens when you let go. When you stop controlling the how and when, the universe finally has room to move. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but grows in size." So when you grasp, you amplify chaos. But when you release, you welcome clarity. This is not mystical fluff. It's spiritual law, grounded in Jung's understanding of the psyche and the soul. The unconscious knows things before you do. It holds patterns, desires, and truths that your surface mind cannot yet grasp. So when life feels stuck, it may be because your soul is calling you into silence, into listening, into waiting. Stillness becomes the sacred space where your inner self meets divine timing. And the truth is, if you're always doing, always striving, always pushing, you leave no room for the divine to respond. That's why the art of doing nothing, when done with presence, is a practice of deep intelligence. It's not laziness, it's spiritual maturity. And it's in this space of conscious surrender that the most unexpected miracles take root. So here's the lesson. If nothing's moving, maybe you're not meant to push harder. Maybe you're being asked to become still enough to hear what your soul already knows. Surrender is not weakness. It is alignment with a power that is far greater than your mind's limited plans. Let go of the pressure to constantly act. Let go of the illusion that urgency equals progress. Your becoming is already in motion. Trust the pause. Trust the timing. Trust the unseen. This is the spiritual wisdom Carl Jung left behind not to force your life into shape, but to trust that when you stop interfering, the universe responds in ways you couldn't possibly orchestrate. 6. Return to wholeness, not perfection. Carl Jung's concept of individuation is not about striving to become perfect, but about returning to a state of inner wholeness, a spiritual homecoming to the self that existed before the world demanded you to be something else. You were never meant to chase flawlessness like a prize at the end of a race. Wholeness isn't found in self-improvement routines or perfectionist ideals. It's found when you stop trying to fix yourself and start remembering yourself. Beneath every fear, trauma, or limiting belief is the original soul, the version of you that has always been enough. The process of healing isn't about adding layers of achievement or control. It's about peeling away what's false, what was never yours, and allowing your authentic self to rise again. Jung famously said, "I'd rather be whole than good," reminding us that spiritual growth doesn't demand perfection. It demands honesty, presence, and courage. When you interfere, when you obsess over the outcomes, force the timing, and micromanage the process, you block the very current that's trying to carry you home. The universe doesn't respond to effort the way the world does. It responds to alignment, and alignment begins with trust. True trust isn't passive, it's powerful. It's a deep knowing that the more you listen instead of control, feel instead of suppress, and watch instead of chase, the more life begins to unfold in your favor. The signs show up, the doors open, the synchronicities increase. This is the silent spiritual language of the universe, and it only becomes clear when you're still enough to hear it. You cannot force your way into wholeness. It must be allowed. As Jung said, what you resist persists. The more you try to perfect what doesn't need fixing, the more you drift from your truth. To live in this deeper awareness is to reclaim your energy from all the places it's been scattered, trying to be accepted, trying to be good enough, trying to fit into someone else's idea of success. But your soul was never here to conform. It came here to remember. And in that remembrance, you begin to realize that the shadow parts of you aren't shameful, they're sacred. The wounds aren't barriers, they're bridges. The discomfort isn't punishment, it's a signal that you're shedding what no longer aligns. Wholeness is not a destination you arrive at. It's a recognition of what was always there before the noise began. When you truly see this, when you surrender the need to interfere, when you let the unfolding be enough, the universe meets you in ways that defy logic. Because the soul doesn't speak in logic, it speaks in resonance. And when your being is in resonance with your truth, that's when everything begins to move. Not because you pushed, but because you aligned. Leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any soul-nourishing insights like this. Type in the comments, "I choose to return to wholeness," and let the journey back to your true self begin. 7. You already are what you seek. You already are what you seek. This truth, so often buried beneath years of striving, shame, and social conditioning, is not something you need to earn or chase. It is something to remember. This journey is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to the man you were before the world told you to be someone else. Before they told you that your silence meant weakness, that your stillness meant laziness, that your soul wasn't enough without proof of success. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." And it's in that awakening that your transformation begins, not through force or control, but through surrender. Because the moment you stop interfering, the universe begins to move on your behalf in ways your logic cannot comprehend. Letting go isn't giving up. It's an act of deep trust, a spiritual intelligence that understands there's a greater design than what your ego can grasp. You've been taught to grind, to chase, to conquer. But real strength, the kind that changes your life from the inside out, comes from presence, not pressure. When you stop chasing what you think will finally make you worthy and start embracing what your soul already knows, everything begins to align. The universe doesn't respond to your noise. It responds to your energy. And when your energy is calm, centered, and surrendered, it mirrors that peace back to you in ways you didn't even know were possible. What you force will fracture. What you allow will flow. The soul remembers what the mind forgets, that you are already whole. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to strip away everything that was never truly you. All the masks, the performances, the desperate attempts to prove your value, they only push you further from your core. When you stop trying to become something and simply allow yourself to be, life unfolds with a quiet grace. You meet people who feel like home. You attract opportunities that align with your truth. You stop living in reaction and start existing in resonance. This is not magic. This is alignment. And it's only available when you stop interfering. You may think surrender means weakness, but it's actually the highest form of strength. It's when you release the illusion of control and trust the soul's deeper knowing. You stop needing answers and start becoming the space where answers arrive naturally. You stop demanding signs and become the sign. This is what Carl Jung meant when he taught that the unconscious drives our lives when left unexamined. The more you quiet the noise, the more you allow your soul to lead. And when your soul leads, life doesn't just change, it begins to reflect who you've been all along, beneath the striving, beneath the silence, beneath the search. You already are what you seek. Now let the universe prove it. To affirm your return to your true self, declare it with intention. Comment below, "I already am enough," to honor your inner wholeness and inspire others to stop chasing and start remembering who they truly are. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Carl Jung's silent truth. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is not interfere, to simply trust, observe, and allow the universe to respond in its own divine timing. Let life reveal its wisdom without your constant intervention. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs this reminder, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Be sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos that guide you deeper into spiritual growth and inner peace.